All right, let's dive right into this explainer. May Day is supposed to be this time where we celebrate the people who build everything around us, right? The actual engine of the economy. But, well, when we neutrally look at the data from the source material, a really fascinating and honestly kind of stark reality emerges. The hardest working people, the ones showing up early, grinding out double shifts, literally doing everything right, are somehow falling further behind. And I want to be clear, it's not because they aren't trying hard enough. It's because the financial system was legally, quietly, and deliberately redesigned. We're going to explore exactly how this shift happened by following the story of a guy named Marcus.
Part 1. The Broken Promise. So picture 19-year-old Marcus. He's sitting across from his dad at the kitchen table. Now, his dad just wrapped up a grueling 27-year career doing heavy factory labor, and he passes down this classic, well-worn piece of advice. Work hard, show up every day. That's all you need. And the thing is, for a really long time, that promise was absolutely true. Like, from 1948 right up to the late 1970s, worker productivity and worker pay actually rose together. It was a reliable deal. You worked harder, and your paycheck proved it. But then, the deal changed. And it changed silently. Nobody sent out a memo. Just look at the numbers between 1979 and 2024. After you account for inflation, average wages increased by just 29.4%. But worker productivity? That shot up by almost 81%. Think about that for a second. Since 1979, workers became practically 3 times more productive, but they got less than a third of what all that extra productivity was actually worth. So Marcus stared at data exactly like this, looked down at his own paycheck, and realized, wait a minute, the math here just isn't adding up.
Which brings us to part 2, the hidden mechanism.
So the absolutely crucial point to understand here is that the value of all that extra productivity, it didn't just vanish into thin air. Money never really disappears, right? It just moves. And in this case, it shifted into 3 very specific channels. First, it went into the salaries of highly paid corporate and professional elites. Second, it moved into higher overall corporate profits. And third, into returns for shareholders and capital owners. What this data definitively shows is a massive structural shift of wealth away from the people providing the labor and directly toward the people who own the capital. When Marcus started digging into his own company's public financial accounts, he had this massive revelation. He realized all his 5 a.m. starts, all those missed weekends, they weren't actually securing his future. The fruits of his extra labor were funding the CEO, the shareholders, and the people who actually own the machine, instead of the people like him who are operating it. And to put that into perspective, look at how fast this disparity builds. 300 times. Back in 1965, a CEO at a major firm made about 20 times what a typical worker made. Fast forward to today, that gap has exploded to nearly 300 times. And the research points out that this higher pay doesn't just mean CEOs are suddenly working 300 times harder. It's a structural reality. The people who own the companies essentially get to write the rules on how the profits are distributed. And honestly, the projections for 2026 deliver an absolute gut punch. The wealthiest 1% are on track to hold roughly $55 trillion. Meanwhile, the bottom 50% of all U.S. households, that is literally half the entire country, account for a measly 2.5% of the overall net wealth. It's like a giant puzzle where someone else took all the pieces. When Marcus saw this mathematical reality, he literally closed his laptop and just sat in the dark. The scale of this shift is just staggering. Part 3. The pattern interrupt. Okay, let's fast forward a few years. Marcus is older, he's a bit wiser, and he finds himself stopping a younger, furious coworker who just got passed over for a raise. This coworker is venting, totally angry at the unfairness of it all, basically making the exact same conceptual mistake Marcus used to make. So to challenge that anger, Marcus asks him a super simple question. What does this system actually respond to? He tells him, look, being angry is completely valid, but the economic system is a machine. It doesn't care about your feelings, your loyalty, or how exhausted you are. It only responds to one specific thing. And that thing is ownership. Once Marcus finally understood this mechanism, how wealth legally and functionally moves through our economy, he completely abandoned the frustrating idea of trying to, quote-unquote, earn his way out of the middle class using wages alone. He decided he had to start building his way out. And that meant shifting his entire focus away from purely providing labor to actually holding capital. Which brings us to part 4, 3 shifts for wealth. Now I want to share the specific compounding changes Marcus made to his own financial architecture. And he did this without ever getting a massive raise and without taking the crazy risk of starting a new business. But first, he had to confront this staggering statistic. 87% of stock-owning Americans are adults living in households earning over $100,000 a year. Think about that. The stock market's massive gains have largely bypassed working-class households entirely. Marcus realized he was stuck in that 13% on the outside, and he decided right then and there it was time to break into that exclusive club, no matter how small he had to start. So here are the 3 exact steps he took. First, he shifted from income thinking to ownership thinking. Wages have a hard ceiling, but ownership? It doesn't, so he just started buying tiny stakes in broad index funds. Second, he moved from willpower saving to automated architecture. Because let's face it, relying on willpower to save whatever is left at the end of the month almost never works. Instead, he automated a transfer to future markets on payday, literally before rent or groceries even hit. And third, he moved from 1 income stream to 3. A single wage is a single point of failure, right? So he built up small secondary streams until his primary day job effectively became optional. Finally, part 5, the lingering reality. So let's bring this back to where we started. Picture Marcus once again at that kitchen table. Only now he's comfortably secure, looking at his dad's original advice framed on the wall behind him. And you know what? He realizes his dad wasn't entirely wrong. Hard work absolutely matters. It is the foundation. But the harsh truth, the reality he learned the hard way, is that hard work without the ownership component is really just making someone else rich on a very dignified schedule. Your labor is just fueling the machine for the people who own the capital. And that leads us to the ultimate takeaway from this whole explainer. The system was not built against you, it was built without you in mind. When you take a step back and neutrally look at the data, you realize you're facing a mechanical problem, not a moral one. And because it's a mechanical problem, well, you have the personal agency to change your relationship to it, just like Marcus did.
So, what does this all mean for us? If you want to stop falling behind, the math clearly shows you've got to transition from just providing labor to actually holding capital. But here's the thing, Marcus's financial journey didn't just end there. Next time, we're going to follow him as he uncovers a completely different hidden metric. This is something regarding his spending that he had been completely ignoring for 3 years. It's a wildly fascinating concept that we're going to call the ghost number. And trust me, you absolutely won't want to miss how that changes the math all over again. Thanks so much for learning with us today.